The arrival of the Coalition fleet. The Zorian Nebula stretched across the void like an ethereal tapestry, its vibrant swirls of emerald and sapphire gas painting an otherworldly masterpiece against the infinite black. Its beauty was deceptive, masking the tension brewing among the assembled ships that orbited its edges. For Captain Lyanna Astor of the Terran Defense Force, this serene backdrop was at odds with the weight of the moment. A meeting that could determine the survival of Earth and the future of countless species across the galaxy. Aboard the TDF Resolute, a battle-hardened frigate with its hull marred by past victories, Lyanna stood tall on the bridge. Her uniform was crisp, the silver insignia of her rank gleaming under the glow of the console lights, but her expression betrayed her unease. Around her, the hum of activity filled the air as her crew prepared for what lay ahead. "Status report," she called, her voice calm and commanding, though a faint edge of tension slipped through. "Systems are fully operational, Captain," replied her XO, Commander Elias Kern, a seasoned officer with graying temples and a perpetual smirk that hinted at years of experience in impossible situations. "Weapons calibrated, shields at maximum readiness. We're as ready as we'll ever be." Lyanna nodded, her gaze shifting to the massive view screen that dominated the bridge. It displayed the scene outside, a gathering of ships from dozens of species, each vessel reflecting the distinct culture and technology of its creators. The crystalline starships of the Ithari glittered like fragile glass sculptures, their edges refracting starlight in mesmerizing patterns. The Granok ships, in stark contrast, were brutish and utilitarian, their angular designs bristling with visible weaponry. The Xelte bioships, pulsing faintly with bioluminescence, seemed alive, their organic forms gliding through space with an eerie grace. Then there were the Terran ships. The Resolute and her counterparts lacked the elegance or alien ingenuity of their peers. They were blocky, unpolished, and scarred by countless battles. But there was a stark beauty in their practicality, a quiet defiance etched into every hull plate, a testament to humanity's resilience and adaptability. They didn't stand out because of grandeur. They stood out because of their purpose. "Quite the party," Elias murmured, stepping closer to Lyanna. His eyes reflected the nebula's glow as he observed the screen. "Not every day you see half the galaxy's power brokers gathered in one place." "Let's hope it's worth the risk," Lyanna replied. "A meeting like this paints a big target." As if on cue, an alert chimed at the comm station. Lieutenant Sarin, a sharp-eyed officer with a knack for detecting anomalies, leaned forward over her console. "Captain, incoming transmission from the Ithari flagship, the Celestial Grace. They're requesting to initiate the summit." Lyanna inhaled deeply. "Patch it through." The screen shifted to display an Ithari diplomat, their translucent skin shimmering like liquid crystal under soft lights. The Ithari were known for their elegance and diplomacy, their delicate appearance concealing an intellect and resolve that had earned them respect across the galaxy. This Ithari, Envoy Tikal, bowed their elongated head in greeting. "Captain Astor." Tikal's voice resonated, melodic yet firm. "The Coalition extends its gratitude for your presence. The time has come to discuss the threat we all face." Lyanna inclined her head slightly. "Envoy Tikal, the Terran Defense Force is honored to stand with the Coalition. Humanity understands the stakes." "Indeed," Tikal replied, their crystalline eyes glinting. "The enemy grows bolder, their incursions more frequent. Alone, none of us can stand against them. Together, however." A sharp alarm interrupted the transmission. Sarin's voice cut through the tense silence. "Captain, multiple contacts detected at the edge of the nebula. Unidentified ships entering sensor range." Lyanna's stomach tightened. On screen, the view screen flickered, revealing a cluster of incoming vessels. Their jagged, asymmetrical designs were unmistakable. The Ravagers, a nomadic race of raiders that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. Ruthless and unpredictable, they thrived on chaos, preying on weaker worlds, and splintering alliances with their brutal tactics. That they would dare to approach this summit was a bold move and a clear provocation. "They're testing us," Elias said grimly. "Or trying to disrupt the talks before they begin," Lyanna countered. Her mind raced through possible scenarios, weighing options against the limited intelligence they had on the Ravagers' capabilities. "Saren, how many ships?" "7, Captain, small to medium class. Their formation suggests a scouting party, but they're armed." Lyanna's jaw tightened. "Open a channel to the fleet." The screen split into multiple feeds, each displaying the face, or equivalent, of the coalition leaders aboard their respective ships. Some, like the Granok warlord, bristled with aggression, ready for battle. Others, like the Tselte speaker, radiated calm, their bioluminescent aura pulsating softly. "The Ravagers have entered the nebula," Lyanna announced without preamble. "This isn't a coincidence. They're here to provoke us or gather intel." The Granok warlord, General Varric, bared his sharp teeth in a predatory grin. "Let them try. We'll teach them the cost of crossing the coalition." "Patience, General," Tikal interjected smoothly. A hasty response could play into their hands. "We must assess their intentions carefully." "Agreed," Lyanna said. "If we escalate too quickly, we risk revealing our full capabilities, or worse, fracturing the coalition before it even begins." Elias leaned closer to her, his voice low. "You think they're baiting us?" "It's possible," she replied. "But if we ignore them, we send a message of weakness." She turned back to the screen. "In Voidkel, General Varric, with your permission, the Resolute will intercept. We'll probe their defenses and determine their intentions." Tikal's crystalline features seemed to shimmer in approval. A measured response. "Proceed," Captain Astor. Varric grunted but nodded. "Don't hold back. Make them regret coming here." Lyanna glanced at her crew. "You heard the orders. Helm, set a course to intercept. Tactical, bring weapons online but hold fire until I give the command." The Resolute surged forward, engines igniting with a fiery glow. On the bridge, the tension was palpable as the crew prepared for the encounter. The Ravager ships loomed closer, their dark, menacing silhouettes a stark contrast against the vibrant nebula. "Captain," Saren reported, her voice tight, "the Ravagers are scanning us. No sign of aggressive maneuvers yet." Lyanna narrowed her eyes. "They're testing our resolve." As the Resolute closed the distance, Lyanna's voice rang out. "Open a channel to the lid ship." Static crackled before an image resolved on the screen. A hulking Ravager commander with scared, leathery skin and eyes like molten metal. He sneered, his voice a guttural growl. "Humans, always so eager to play hero." Lyanna didn't flinch. "You're trespassing in coalition space. Turn back, or we'll consider this an act of war." The Ravager leaned closer, his grin widening. "War? No, this is just a greeting." Before Lyanna could respond, the transmission cut off, and alarms blared across the bridge. "Captain," Saren shouted. "They're powering weapons." Lyanna's expression hardened. "All hands, battle stations. Let's show them what humanity is capable of." The Resolute surged forward, ready to meet the challenge head-on, its crew determined to defend not just Earth but the fragile unity of the coalition. The Ravager gambit. The Resolute cut through the vibrant mist of the Zorian Nebula, like a predator stalking its prey. Despite its utilitarian design, the ship moved with purpose, a stark reminder of humanity's adaptability. On board, the crew worked with the synchronized efficiency of a well-oiled machine, each member focused on their task as the Ravager ships loomed closer. "Multiple weapon systems locking onto us, Captain," reported Lieutenant Saren, her sharp eyes glued to her console. The tension in her voice mirrored the growing unease on the bridge. "Shields up," Captain Lyanna Astor ordered. Her voice was calm, but carried the weight of authority. "Tactical, I want firing solutions on their lead ship. Helm, maintain course but be ready to execute evasive maneuvers." Commander Elias Kern leaned closer to Lyanna, his sharp gaze scanning the redouts. This isn't their style. Ravagers prefer hit-and-run tactics, not head-on confrontations. Lyanna nodded, her thoughts racing. The Ravagers were notorious for their chaotic and brutal methods, but this formation was deliberate, almost calculated. It was a statement, a challenge. "They're testing the coalition," she said. "If we falter here, it'll embolden them." The Ravager ships began to fan out, their jagged hulls resembling predatory beasts encircling their target. They moved with an eerie precision that only deepened Lyanna's suspicion. "Saren, are we picking up any unusual energy signatures?" she asked. Saren frowned as her fingers danced over the console. "Yes, Captain. Faint energy spikes in the nebula's outer layers. It could be additional ships using the gas as cover." Lyanna's jaw tightened. "So, this is a distraction. They're drawing us in while their reinforcements flank us." Elias swore under his breath. "Classic Ravager misdirection. What's the play?" Lyanna didn't hesitate. "We spring their trap before they're ready. Helm, adjust course. Take us into the nebula. Tactical, prepare countermeasures." Elias raised an eyebrow. "We're diving into their ambush." "We are," Lyanna replied, a determined glint in her eyes. "If we stay here, we'll be surrounded on their terms. If we move first, we force them to react." The Resolute pivoted sharply, its engines flaring as it plunged deeper into the nebula. The view screen filled with swirling clouds of green and blue, the ship's sensors struggling to penetrate the dense gas. The Ravagers followed, their ships moving with predatory intent. "Enemy vessels closing in, Captain," Saren reported. "3 on our tail, 2 moving to intercept from the port side." Lyanna's mind raced, weighing her options. The nebula was a double-edged sword. Its dense gases disrupted sensors and communications, making it an ideal place for an ambush. But it also offered opportunities for someone willing to think unconventionally. "Tactical, deploy decoy drones," she ordered. "Let's give them something else to chase." The bridge crew sprang into action. Moments later, a cluster of small drones shot out from the Resolute, each emitting signals designed to mimic the ship's energy signature. The Ravagers hesitated, their formation breaking as they split to pursue the decoys. "They're taking the bait," Elias observed, a hint of admiration in his voice. "Nice move, Captain." Lyanna allowed herself a small smile. "Let's not celebrate yet. Tactical, target their lid ship and fire a warning shot." The Resolute's weapons hummed to life, and a streak of crimson energy lanced through the nebula, narrowly missing the Ravager flagship. The shot was precise, intentional, a warning rather than a declaration of war. The Ravager commander appeared on the view screen, his scared face twisted in a snarl. "Do you think you can intimidate us, human?" Lyanna met his gaze without flinching. "This isn't intimidation. It's a reminder. You're outmatched, and you know it. Stand down now, and we'll let you leave." The Ravager growled, his molten metal eyes burning with rage. "Your coalition is weak, fractured. You cling to alliances like a drowning man clings to driftwood. But we thrive on chaos. This nebula will be your grave." The transmission cut off, and alarms blared as the Ravagers opened fire. Bright streaks of plasma lit up the view screen, hurtling toward the Resolute. "Evasive maneuvers," Lyanna barked. The ship lurched as the helmsman executed a series of sharp turns, narrowly avoiding the incoming fire. The Resolute's shields flared, absorbing the few shots that made contact. "Tactical, return fire," Lyanna ordered. The Resolute unleashed a barrage of its own, its railguns spitting hypervelocity slugs while its energy cannons carved through the nebula. One of the pursuing Ravager ships was struck, its hull breaching in a violent explosion. "Direct hit," Saren reported, her voice triumphant. "1 down, 6 to go." The remaining Ravager ships adjusted their tactics, spreading out to flank the Resolute. Lyanna's gaze flicked to the tactical display. noting the faint energy signatures Saren had detected earlier. The reinforcements were closing in. "Elias," she said, her tone low. "What's the status of our EMP charge?" Elias's eyes widened. "You're thinking of detonating it in the nebula." "Exactly," Lyanna replied. "The gas will amplify the pulse, disrupting their systems long enough for us to regroup." Elias hesitated for a moment before nodding. "It's risky, but it might just work." Lyanna turned to the crew. "All hands, prepare for an EMP detonation. Helm, plot an escape vector. We need to be clear of the blast radius." The Resolute maneuvered deeper into the nebula, its engines burning brightly as the Ravagers gave chase. The enemy ships closed the distance, their weapons pounding the Resolute's shields. "EMP charge primed," Elias reported. "Detonate on my mark," Lyanna said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. 3, 2, 1. Mark. The EMP charge detonated with a brilliant flash, sending a wave of electromagnetic energy rippling through the nebula. The Ravager ships flickered as their systems overloaded, their engines sputtering and weapons falling silent. "Enemy ships disabled," Saren confirmed, "but the reinforcements are still closing in." Lyanna didn't hesitate. "Helm, execute the escape vector. Get us clear of the nebula." The Resolute surged forward, leaving the disabled Ravager ships behind as it emerged into open space. The Coalition fleet was waiting, their weapons trained on the nebula's edge. "Message to the fleet," Lyanna ordered. "Ravager trap neutralized. Recommend immediate action to secure the area." The view screen displayed a flurry of activity as the Coalition ships moved into position, their combined firepower creating an impenetrable wall. The Ravager reinforcements hesitated, then retreated into the depths of the nebula. Elias let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Well, that was one way to start the summit. Lyanna allowed herself a small smile. Let's hope the rest of it goes more smoothly. As the Resolute returned to its position, Lyanna couldn't shake the feeling that the Ravager encounter was just the beginning. The enemy had tested their resolve, but the real challenge was yet to come. The enemy within. The Resolute drifted back to its position near the Coalition fleet, its hull gleaming under the nebula's ethereal glow. Despite the relative calm after the Ravager encounter, tension lingered on the bridge. Captain Lyanna Astor stood at her post, her sharp eyes scanning the tactical readouts as if searching for unseen dangers. "We've sustained minor shield damage, Captain," reported Lieutenant Saren, her fingers moving deftly across her console. "Repair crews are already on it." "Good," Lyanna replied. "Keep me updated on their progress. We need to be fully operational before the next move." Commander Elias Kern leaned on the console beside her, his brow furrowed. "They're prodding us," he said, his voice low. "That wasn't just an ambush. They were gathering intel, testing our response times, our coordination." Lyanna nodded, her expression grim. "And they'll be back, armed with whatever they learned. But this isn't just about the Ravagers. Something about this whole situation doesn't sit right." Elias glanced at her. "You think someone's pulling their strings?" "I don't think," Lyanna said, her voice firm. "I know. The Ravagers thrive on chaos, but this operation was too coordinated, too calculated. They had someone guiding them, someone who knew exactly how to exploit our vulnerabilities." As if on cue, the comm station chimed. Saren straightened in her seat. "Incoming transmission from the Celestial Grace. It's Envoy Tikal." "Patch them through," Lyanna ordered. The screen flickered to life, revealing the familiar crystalline visage of Tikal. The Etherian voice's serene demeanor was unshaken, though their luminous eyes betrayed a hint of concern. "Captain Astor," Tikal began, their voice melodic yet firm, "your actions have once again proven humanity's worth to the Coalition. The Ravagers' advance has been halted, for now." "Thank you, Envoy," Lyanna replied. But the encounter raised more questions than it answered. The Ravagers were unusually organized. It's unlikely they acted alone. Tikal inclined their head. Your assessment aligns with our own suspicions. Intelligence suggests that factions within the coalition itself may be compromised. Elias frowned. You're saying someone inside the coalition is working with the Ravagers. It is a possibility we cannot ignore, Tikal said. That is why we convened this summit, not just to address the external threat, but to root out the internal one. Lyanna's jaw tightened. Do you have any leads? Tikal's crystalline eyes shimmered. There have been whispers of a rogue faction within the Zereth Syndicate, a powerful trading alliance. Their recent activities suggest a connection to the Ravagers. The Zereth Syndicate. Elias echoed, disbelief in his voice. They profit from stability. Why would they risk aligning with raiders? Cal's expression hardened. Profit can be found in chaos as easily as in order, Commander. Disrupting the coalition weakens its member states, creating opportunities for exploitation. Lyanna's mind raced. The Zereth Syndicate was one of the most influential factions in the galaxy, controlling vast trade networks and wielding significant political power. If they were involved, the implications were staggering. What's the plan? Lyanna asked, her voice steady despite the weight of the revelation. Tikal hesitated for a moment before replying. We must tread carefully. A direct accusation could fracture the coalition. Instead, we propose a covert investigation. The Resolute has proven its capability. Will you take on this mission, Captain? Lyanna exchanged a glance with Elias. He gave a subtle nod, his confidence in her unwavering. We'll do it, Lyanna said firmly. Send us the details. Tikal inclined their head in gratitude. May the stars guide you, Captain. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Elias let out a low whistle. Covert investigations against a galactic trade powerhouse. This just keeps getting better. Lyanna smirked faintly. If it were easy, they wouldn't need us. Into the shadows. Later that evening, Lyanna convened her senior officers in the war room, a dimly lit chamber dominated by a holographic display. The Zereth Syndicate's trade routes and outposts flickered in blue, while suspected Ravager activity was highlighted in red. Our target is a Syndicate outpost in the Karanis Belt, Lyanna began. It's a minor facility on paper, but intelligence suggests it's been used to funnel resources to the Ravagers. Lieutenant Sarin studied the map, her sharp eyes narrowing. The Karanis Belt is crawling with Syndicate patrols. We can't just troll in. We won't, Lyanna replied. The Resolute will remain on the outskirts, maintaining a low profile. A small team will infiltrate the outpost, gather intel, and confirm the Syndicate's involvement. Elias crossed his arms. Let me guess, you want me to lead the team. You've got the experience, Lyanna said. And you're the only one I trust to pull this off. Elias sighed theatrically. You're lucky I enjoy a challenge. Lyanna's gaze swept across the table. Elias will lead the infiltration team. Sarin, you'll coordinate from the bridge. The rest of you, stay sharp. The Syndicate won't take kindly to uninvited guests. The infiltration. The Karanis Belt was a sprawling field of asteroids and debris, illuminated by the dim glow of a dying star. The Resolute hovered at the edge of the field, its engines silent to avoid detection. Elias and his team of 5 crept aboard a stealth shuttle, their dark suits blending seamlessly with the shadows. Each member carried compact, multipurpose gear designed for infiltration and survival in hostile environments. Remember, Elias said as the shuttle approached the Syndicate outpost, this is a recon mission. Minimal engagement. Get the intel and get out. The outpost loomed ahead, its angular structure clinging to a massive asteroid like a parasite. Syndicate patrol ships drifted lazily nearby, their movements methodical but predictable. The shuttle slipped past the patrols, its cloaking technology masking its presence. As it docked at a maintenance hatch, Elias and his team disembarked, their magnetic boots clinging to the asteroid's surface. Inside the outpost, the atmosphere was starkly different. The halls were sterile and quiet, save for the hum of machinery. Syndicate personnel moved about their tasks, oblivious to the intruders navigating the ventilation shafts above them. Elias gestured for his team to stop as they reached a security hub. Below, a console flickered with activity, guarded by 2 Syndicate operatives. "Devi, on me," Elias whispered to his tech specialist. "The rest of you, cover us." Devi nodded, her fingers already working to disable the security cameras. With precision born of years of training, Elias and Devi dropped silently into the room. Within moments, the guards were subdued, their unconscious forms hidden behind equipment crates. Devi plugged a data spike into the console, her eyes scanning the rapidly scrolling information. "Got it," she whispered. "Resource manifests, financial transactions," and her voice trailed off, her brow furrowing. "Captain, you're going to want to see this." Elias activated his comms. "Liana, we've got something." "Transmitting now." Back on the Resolute, Liana and Saren studied the data streaming onto their displays. The logs revealed massive transfers of weaponry and supplies to Ravager-controlled territories, enough to sustain a war. "It's worse than we thought," Saren said, her voice grim. "They're not just aiding the Ravagers. They're building an army." Liana's eyes hardened. "Then it's time the galaxy learns the truth." Shadows of betrayal. The bridge of the Resolute was unusually quiet. Captain Liana Astor sat in her chair, her fingers drumming a rhythmic pattern on the armrest. The data extracted from the Zereth Syndicate's outpost was spread across her command console, a damning trail of transactions, weapon shipments, and supply routes connecting the Syndicate to the Ravagers. It was irrefutable evidence of betrayal, but it raised more questions than answers. "How deep does this go?" Liana murmured, more to herself than anyone else. Commander Elias Kern stood beside her, his arms crossed. The infiltration team had returned safely, and though their mission had been a success, the weight of what they'd uncovered hung heavy in the air. "If this is what we found at a minor outpost," Elias said, his voice low, "imagine what they're hiding at their primary hubs." This wasn't a few rogue agents. This was systemic. Lieutenant Saren leaned forward at her console. "Captain, the Syndicate's been supplying the Ravagers for years. Some of these transactions date back a decade. They'd been playing both sides, fueling conflicts to destabilize the galaxy while profiting from the chaos." Liana's expression hardened, and now they've turned their sights on the Coalition. "If they succeed in fracturing us, they'll have free rein." Elias nodded. "They've invested too much to stop now. They'll double down to protect their interests." Liana pushed herself to her feet, the weight of command heavy on her shoulders. "Then we need to act before they consolidate their power. Saren, analyze their supply routes. Find the weakest link. We'll cut them off and force them into the open." "Yes, Captain," Saren replied, her fingers flying across the console. Elias raised an eyebrow. "What about the Coalition Council? They won't take kindly to unilateral action." Liana's jaw tightened. "The Council's too slow, too cautious. By the time they reach a consensus, the Syndicate will have buried the evidence. We can't wait for their approval." Elias smirked faintly. "You always did have a knack for bending the rules." "It's not bending the rules," Liana shot back, though her tone was laced with humor. "It's ensuring we still have a galaxy left to govern. The price of unity." The next morning, the Resolute slipped away from the Coalition fleet under the cover of the Zorian Nebula. Their destination: a key Syndicate supply hub in the neutral Trinary expanse. If they could disrupt the Syndicate's logistics, they'd cripple their ability to support the Ravagers. The journey was tense. The Syndicate's reach was vast, and their patrols were relentless. Liana knew they were walking a fine line. Any misstep could spark a war the Coalition wasn't ready to fight. On the third day, Saren approached Liana in the war room. "Captain, we've intercepted a Syndicate transmission. It's encrypted, but the metadata suggests it's coming from one of their senior operatives. Can you crack it?" Liana asked. Saren hesitated. "Given enough time, yes, but there's a problem." Lyanna raised an eyebrow. What kind of problem? The signals originating from within the coalition fleet. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Lyanna leaned back, her mind racing. You're saying we have a mole? Saren nodded. Someone high-ranking enough to access secure channels and transmit covertly. It explains how the syndicate's been one step ahead. Elias, who had entered just in time to hear the exchange, let out a low whistle. Well, that complicates things. Lyanna's eyes narrowed. It doesn't change the mission. We'll deal with the mole once we have proof. For now, focus on the hub. The Trinary Expanse. The Trinary Expanse was a lawless region of space, a haven for smugglers, pirates, and opportunists. Its tangled web of asteroid fields and ion storms made it a nightmare to navigate, but it was the perfect hiding spot for a syndicate supply hub. As the Resolute emerged from the warp tunnel, the hub came into view. It was a massive structure built into the largest asteroid, its surface bristling with defensive turrets and docking bays. Syndicate ships flitted to and fro, their movements methodical and efficient. Impressive, Elias remarked as he studied the display. They've turned an asteroid into a fortress. Lyanna folded her arms. Every fortress has a weakness. Saren, what do we know? Saren pulled up the hub's schematics. The outer defenses are formidable, but their supply freighters are less protected. If we can intercept one and gain access codes, we might be able to infiltrate. Lyanna nodded. Then that's our opening. Tactical, prepare an EMP missile. Helm, position us along their supply route. The Resolute maneuvered into position, its engines powered down to avoid detection. Hours passed as they waited in silence, the crew's tension palpable. Finally, a lone syndicate freighter appeared on their sensors. Target acquired, Saren reported. Engage, Lyanna ordered. The EMP missile streaked toward the freighter, detonating with a burst of electromagnetic energy. The freighter's systems flickered and died, leaving it adrift. Boarding party, you're up, Lyanna said. Elias, bring me that freighter. Beneath the mask, the boarding party breached the freighter's hull with practiced precision. Inside, they encountered minimal resistance. Most of the crew were incapacitated by the EMP. Elias led the team to the bridge, where they found the freighter's captain, a wiry alien with sharp features and a defiant glare. You've made a mistake, the captain snarled as Elias restrained him. The syndicate doesn't forgive. Elias smirked. Good thing we're not asking for forgiveness. Devi, the tech specialist, worked quickly to extract the freighter's access codes. Got it, she said after a few tense minutes. This will get us past the hub's defenses. Good work, Elias replied. He turned to the freighter's captain. And you're coming with us. Let's see how talkative you are after a few hours in the break. The web tightens. Back on the Resolute, the access codes allowed them to bypass the hub's outer defenses undetected. The ship slipped into a maintenance dock, its stealth systems masking its presence. Lyanna stood on the bridge, her gaze fixed on the tactical display. We're in, Saren confirmed. No signs of detection. Good, Lyanna replied. Elias, take your team and plant tracking beacons on their main supply depots. We'll make this operation impossible to hide. Elias grinned. On it, Captain. As the boarding team infiltrated the hub, Lyanna couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The syndicate's operation was vast and well organized, too well organized. Whoever was behind, this wasn't just funding chaos. They were orchestrating it. Suddenly, an alert flashed on Saren's console. Captain, we've been locked out of the network. Someone's onto us. Lyanna's stomach dropped. Elias, get out of there. Now. A trap sprung. Alarms blared as the syndicate's defenses came online. Automated turrets swiveled toward the Resolute, and squadrons of syndicate fighters launched from the docking bays. Elias's voice crackled over the comm. Captain, we're pinned down. They've sealed the exits. Lyanna gritted her teeth. We're not leaving you behind. Tactical, prepare suppression fire. "Helm, get us into position for extraction." The Resolute surged forward, its weapons cutting a path through the Syndicate fighters. On the surface of the hub, Elias and his team fought their way to the extraction point, dodging a relentless onslaught of security drones. As the boarding ramp lowered, Elias shouted, "Go, go, go." His team scrambled aboard just as the Syndicate's reinforcements arrived. "Everyone's aboard," Saren called. "Punch it," Lyanna ordered. The Resolute rocketed out of the dock, its engines flaring as it outran the Syndicate's pursuing ships. As the ship re-entered open space, Elias collapsed into a chair, breathing heavily. "Well, that could have gone better." "We got what we came for," Lyanna said, her tone resolute. "Now we expose the Syndicate for what they are." The Syndicate's mask. The Resolute cut through the void of space, its engines leaving faint trails of light in its wake as it sped toward the Coalition fleet's rendezvous point. On board, Captain Lyanna Astor studied the intelligence they'd extracted from the Syndicate's supply hub. The damning evidence filled her display: detailed manifests of weapon shipments, encrypted communications with Ravager warlords, and plans for destabilizing key Coalition worlds. "This is enough to bury them," Lieutenant Saren said from her console, her eyes scanning the data. "But it won't matter if the Council delays action." "They will delay," Commander Elias Kern interjected, leaning against the bulkhead. "The Syndicate has too many friends in high places. By the time the Council agrees to move, the Syndicate will have spun this as a misunderstanding, or worse, erased the trail." Lyanna closed her fists tightly, frustration bubbling under her composed exterior. "Then we need to force their hand. If we can expose this evidence publicly, the Council will have no choice but to act." Elias raised an eyebrow. "You're talking about going over their heads. That's a dangerous game, Lyanna." "Dangerous is sitting back and watching the Syndicate rip the Coalition apart while we wait for bureaucracy to catch up." Lyanna shot back, her voice steady but firm. "We didn't come this far to let them slip away." A desperate proposal. Lyanna called for an emergency meeting of her senior staff in the war room. The air was thick with tension as the team gathered around the holographic table, which displayed the stolen data. The Syndicate's web of treachery stretched across the galaxy, linking key trade routes, military installations, and Ravager hideouts. "This is bigger than we thought," Saren began. "The Syndicate isn't just funding the Ravagers. They're coordinating them. These documents outline attack patterns, diversion tactics, even precise timings for when and where to strike. They're orchestrating a full-scale destabilization," Elias said grimly. "If this goes unchecked, the Coalition will collapse under its own weight." Lyanna turned to her team, her voice firm. "We have two objectives: expose the Syndicate and force the Coalition to act. To do that, we need to make this evidence public and undeniable." Elias frowned. "Broadcasting this will paint a massive target on us. The Syndicate won't let it slide." "They're already after us," Lyanna countered. "The only way to stop them is to shine a light on their operations." Saren leaned forward. "We'll need a secure, high-visibility platform, something that can't be suppressed or discredited." Elias scratched his chin thoughtfully. "There's the Galactic Public Nexus. It's a neutral communication network used by journalists, researchers, and whistleblowers. Once something's uploaded there, it spreads across the galaxy in minutes. It's risky," Saren added, "but it's our best shot." Lyanna nodded. "Then that's our move. Prepare the evidence for upload. We'll transmit it the moment we reach a secure relay." The pursuit. As the Resolute approached the relay station, alarms blared across the ship. Saren's voice rang out, sharp and urgent. "Captain, we've got incoming. Multiple Syndicate vessels closing fast." "Battle stations," Lyanna barked, rushing to the bridge. The view screen lit up with the image of Syndicate ships, sleek, angular craft bristling with weaponry, bearing down on them. 4 frigates and 1 cruiser, Saren reported. "They're armed to the teeth." They want their data back, Elias said dryly. And they've brought friends. Lyanna's mind raced. The Resolute was built for resilience, not firepower. Against a force this size, a direct confrontation was suicide. Helm, plot an evasive course, Lyanna ordered. Tactical. Prepare decoy drones. Let's give them something else to chase. The Resolute banked sharply, its engines roaring as it veered away from the relay station. The Syndicate ships followed, their weapons firing in precise volleys. The ship shook violently as plasma bolts slammed into its shields. Shields down to 70%. Saren called out. Deploy decoys, Lyanna commanded. A swarm of drones shot out from the Resolute, each one emitting a signal identical to the ship's. The Syndicate vessels hesitated, their formation breaking as they pursued the false targets. They're splitting up, Elias observed. That buys us some time, but not much. We don't need much, Lyanna replied. Helm, swing us around. We're heading back to the relay. The upload. The relay station loomed ahead, a massive structure bristling with antennas and communication arrays. The Resolute closed the distance quickly, its engines straining under the stress of evasive maneuvers. Captain, the Syndicate cruiser is re-engaging, Saren warned. They're focusing all fire on us. Hold course, Lyanna said, her voice steady. Saren, initiate the upload as soon as we're in range. The Resolute shuddered under the impact of another volley, sparks flying from overloaded consoles. Shields down to 30%. Saren called out. Come on, Elias muttered under his breath. Just a little closer. Finally, the relay's secure signal pinged on Saren's console. We're in range. Starting the upload. Make it fast, Lyanna said. We won't last long under this fire. The bridge was a flurry of activity as the upload progressed. The Syndicate cruiser loomed closer, its weapons glowing ominously as it prepared a final barrage. Upload at 50%, Saren reported. They're trying to jam us, but I'm holding them off. The Resolute shook violently as another volley struck its hull. Smoke filled the air, and emergency alarms blared. Shields are gone. Elias shouted. We're taking direct hits. Upload at 70%, Saren said, her voice tight with focus. Just a little longer. The Syndicate cruiser closed the distance, its weapons charging for a devastating strike. Lyanna gripped the armrests of her chair, her voice cutting through the chaos. Evasive maneuvers. Divert all power to engines. The Resolute surged forward, narrowly avoiding the cruiser's salvo. The relay station absorbed the brunt of the attack, its shields flaring brightly. Upload complete, Saren announced. The data's live on the galactic public nexus. Lyanna exhaled, a wave of relief washing over her. Good work. Helm, get us out of here. The Resolute banked hard, its engines burning brightly as it fled the relay station. Behind them, the Syndicate ships scrambled to recover, but it was too late. The evidence was out, spreading across the galaxy like wildfire. The fallout. Hours later, the bridge was quiet as the crew monitored the fallout from their actions. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy. News outlets, independent investigators, and coalition members were all poring over the data. The Syndicate's scrambling to contain the damage, Saren said, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. But it's too late. The Coalition Council has already called an emergency session. Elias grinned. Looks like we lit a fire under them. Lyanna allowed herself a small smile. We've exposed the truth. Now it's up to the Council to act. Saren's console beeped, and she frowned. Captain, incoming message from the Coalition fleet. It's Admiral Vorn. Lyanna's smile faded. Admiral Vorn was one of the most influential members of the Council, a staunch defender of the Coalition, but also a political realist. If he was reaching out, it wasn't for pleasantries. Put him through, Lyanna said. The screen flickered, revealing the stern visage of Admiral Vorn. His piercing gaze seemed to bore into her. Captain Astor, he began, his tone measured. Your actions have placed the coalition in a precarious position. With respect, Admiral, Lyanna replied. The coalition was already in a precarious position. I simply exposed the truth. Vorn's expression didn't change, but there was a glint of approval in his eyes. The council will deliberate on this matter. In the meantime, you and your crew are to remain on standby. Understood, Lyanna said. As the transmission ended, Elias leaned closer. Think they'll act? They don't have a choice, Lyanna said. The galaxy's watching now. But even as she spoke, a sense of unease settled over her. The Syndicate wouldn't go down without a fight, and the battle for the Coalition's future was far from over. The Syndicate's retaliation. The Resolute hung in the void of space, its systems undergoing emergency repairs. The crew worked tirelessly, patching damage from the Syndicate assault, while the galaxy reeled from the revelations broadcast through the galactic public nexus. Captain Lyanna Astor knew that while they'd struck a powerful blow against the Syndicate, it was only the opening salvo in a much larger conflict. On the bridge, the tension was palpable. The data screens were alive with news reports, political debates, and the rising outcry against the Zereth Syndicate. Yet beneath the surface of this public uproar, there was an ominous silence, a silence Lyanna recognized as the calm before the storm. A fragile moment. Status report, Lyanna commanded, standing at her post. Lieutenant Sarin glanced up from her console, her face drawn with exhaustion. Hull integrity is holding at 60%. Shield generators are back online, but they're running at reduced capacity. Weapons are operational, but we're down to minimal reserves for our energy cannons. Not exactly a prime fighting condition, Commander Elias Kern remarked, his tone laced with dry humor as he leaned against the bulkhead. We barely survive a skirmish, let alone a full assault. Lyanna crossed her arms, her expression unyielding. We won't have to. The Council has no choice but to act now. The evidence is undeniable. Sarin frowned. The Council may act, but the Syndicate won't wait for a verdict. They've been exposed, and their best move is to strike back hard, to silence us and anyone else who dares challenge them. Before Lyanna could respond, an alert blared through the bridge. Sarin's fingers flew across her console. Captain, we've got incoming. Multiple ships dropping out of warp. The view screen lit up, revealing a fleet of Syndicate vessels. At least a dozen ships, 2 cruisers, 6 frigates, and several smaller support craft emerged from hyperspace, their weapons bristling with hostility. Elias let out a low whistle. That's not a response fleet. That's an execution squad. Lyanna's jaw tightened. All hands, battle stations. Helm, prepare evasive maneuvers. Sarin, broadcast an emergency distress signal to the Coalition fleet. Sarin hesitated. Captain, we're too far from their position. It'll take hours for reinforcements to arrive. Then we hold out until they do, Lyanna said firmly. We've faced worse odds before. The first salvo. The Syndicate fleet wasted no time, launching a coordinated barrage of plasma and missile fire. The Resolute's shields flared brightly as they absorbed the initial onslaught, but the strain was evident. Shields at 40%, Sarin reported, her voice tight. Return fire, Lyanna ordered. Target their lead cruiser. The Resolute unleashed a volley of its own, its railguns and energy cannons lighting up the void. The shot struck the cruiser's shields, creating ripples of distortion, but failing to penetrate. They've reinforced their shielding, Elias observed grimly. They came prepared. Lyanna's mind raced. The Resolute couldn't win a direct confrontation, not against a force this size. They needed to outmaneuver their attackers and buy time for reinforcements. Helm, take us into that asteroid field, she commanded, pointing to a dense cluster of rocks visible on the tactical display. We'll use the terrain to our advantage. The Resolute veered sharply, its engines flaring as it dove into the asteroid field. The Syndicate ships followed, their formations tightening as they pursued. A dangerous game. Inside the asteroid field, The battle became a deadly game of cat and mouse. The Resolute weaved between massive rocks, using the terrain to shield itself from enemy fire. Syndicate ships struggled to maintain their pursuit, their larger cruisers unable to navigate the tight spaces as effectively. "Captain, 2 frigates are closing in on our aft," Saren warned. "Deploy mines," Lyanna ordered. Small, spherical devices launched from the Resolute, drifting silently in the ship's wake. As the Syndicate frigates closed the gap, the mines detonated, releasing powerful shockwaves. One frigate was obliterated, while the other was crippled, its hull torn apart by the blast. Elias grinned. "That's one way to thin the herd." "Don't get cocky," Lyanna replied. "We're still outnumbered." The Resolute banked hard to avoid a cluster of missiles, but the maneuver sent the ship dangerously close to a massive asteroid. The helmsman fought to stabilize the ship, narrowly avoiding a collision. "Shields at 20%, Saren reported. "We can't take much more of this." Reinforcements and revelations. As the Resolute dodged and weaved, Saren's console lit up with a new alert. "Captain, we're picking up multiple warp signatures. Coalition ships inbound." The view screen shifted to show a fleet of coalition vessels emerging from hyperspace. Etheri crystalline ships, Granok war barges, and Celtai bioships joined the fray, their weapons blazing as they engaged the Syndicate fleet. "Looks like we're not alone anymore," Elias said, a note of relief in his voice. The coalition ships coordinated their attack with surgical precision, targeting the Syndicate cruisers and forcing them to retreat. The tide of battle shifted rapidly as the combined firepower of the coalition overwhelmed the Syndicate forces. Lyanna exhaled slowly. "Saren, get me a channel to the coalition flagship." Moments later, Admiral Vorn's stern visage appeared on the screen. "Captain Astor, your distress signal was received. It seems your gamble has paid off." "Admiral, we have the Syndicate on the run, but they won't stop here," Lyanna said. "They've been coordinating with the Ravagers for years. We need to take the fight to them." Vorn's expression was unreadable. "You've already stretched the Council's patience, Captain, but given the circumstances, your initiative may be the decisive factor we need." "Then authorize us to lead a strike," Lyanna pressed. "We know where their command center is. If we hit it now, we can cripple their entire operation." Vorn studied her for a long moment before nodding. "You have your orders, Captain. Make it count." The Syndicate's stronghold. With the coalition fleet at their backs, the Resolute and its allies prepared for a daring assault on the Syndicate's command center. Located deep within the Veil Nebula, the stronghold was a heavily fortified installation surrounded by natural hazards and artificial defenses. As the fleet entered the nebula, the view screens lit up with enemy contacts. Syndicate ships formed a defensive wall, their firepower concentrated around the command center. "This is it," Lyanna said, her voice steady. "All ships, engage on my mark." The coalition fleet surged forward, their combined might crashing against the Syndicate's defenses. The battle was chaotic and brutal, with ships on both sides sustaining heavy damage. The Resolute spearheaded the assault, its weapons targeting the Syndicate's shield generators. As the ship drew closer to the command center, Lyanna felt a surge of determination. This was their chance to end the Syndicate's reign of terror once and for all. "Focus fire on their command center," she ordered. "Bring it down." The Resolute's weapons roared to life, their combined firepower piercing through the Syndicate's defenses. One by one, the enemy ships fell, their stronghold crumbling under the coalition's relentless assault. As the final explosions echoed through the nebula, a hush fell over the battlefield. The Syndicate's forces had been defeated, their command center reduced to rubble. Aftermath. Hours later, aboard the Resolute, Lyanna stood on the bridge, her gaze fixed on the view screen. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. The Syndicate's infrastructure had been dismantled, but their allies and remnants would remain a threat. Elias approached, his usual smirk tempered by exhaustion. "Not bad for a day's work." Lyanna gave a faint smile. "We struck a blow today, but this isn't the end. It's just the beginning of a much bigger fight. Sarin joined them, a hopeful glint in her eyes. At least now, the galaxy knows the truth. The Syndicate's mask is gone. Lyanna nodded, and we'll be ready for whatever comes next.